about sequencing today. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to read a story called A Few New Neighbors. And this is by Carrie McGee. And it's a story about Jesse who finds some new neighbors across the street. Let's read our story. One afternoon, Jesse spotted a tiny bird fluttering around Mrs. Baxter's front door. Mrs. Baxter had just moved into an apartment. It's probably looking for someone to fill the bird feeder, Jesse thought. The bird perched on the edge of the wreath, then it disappeared. Disappeared? Jesse ran over to Miss Baxter's door. Where had it gone? A jumble of sticks and grass stuck out from the middle of the wreath. Suddenly, Jesse understood. A nest. A bird's nest sat right in the middle of Mrs. Baxter's wreath. The bird poked its head out and looked at Jesse and then fluttered away. Jesse crept up to the front door. Tucked inside the nest were 4 speckled blue eggs. Okay, so now we have a little picture that helps us get a better understanding of what that nest looked like. So I also see that I have a word in my story that is in bold print, and that word is jumble. And so if we look at this nest, it doesn't look like a very neat nest. It looks like our bird just stuck all of its pieces inside to make its nest. And that's what the word jumble means, and that picture helps us understand that better. Let's keep reading. Jesse ran home to call Miss Baxter. Guess who moved into your old wreath? Jesse asked. A family of birds. Mrs. Baxter sounded just as excited as Jesse was. Tell me what they look like. What color are the eggs? Jesse and Mrs. Baxter talked about the birds for a while. They sounded like house finches, Miss Baxter said. Keep an eye on them for me, will you? I will, Jesse said. So now Jesse has a new responsibility that she has to take care of. Let's see what happens. And she did. Jesse checked the nest whenever she could. Sometimes the mother finch was there. Other days, the red-headed papa was nearby. Jesse tried to notice everything so that she could tell Miss Baxter. One morning, Jesse saw a pink head poking out of the nest. Babies! Jesse strained her neck to get a better look. Jesse told her dad about the baby birds at Mrs. Baxter's house. That reminds me, Dad said, Mrs. Baxter has movers coming tomorrow to clear out the house. I told her I'd unlock the door for them. Oh my goodness, this could be bad. But what about the nest? Dad shook his head. We'll just tell the movers to be careful. Jesse thought about the movers tromping in and out, squeezing heavy boxes and furniture past the tiny nest. And she thought about the door swinging and slamming all day long. It seemed risky. The next morning, Jesse watched the moving truck pull up to Mrs. Baxter's house. Dad saw the truck too and came outside with the key. Jesse jumped up and she ran ahead of the movers and Dad to Mrs. Baxter's front door. Wait, she shouted, spinning around to face them. Behind her, the mama bird burst out of the nest and landed in a tree. The movers looked at Jesse in surprise. You can't use this door, Jesse said, holding out her arms stiff. I'm sorry, one of the movers said. We have a job to do. Jesse didn't move. There is a nest in this wreath, Jesse explained. If you open the door, it will fall. The other mover sighed. Do you have any ideas? Jesse nodded. I do have an idea. Dad, can I have the key? Jesse, and as carefully as she could, Jesse unlocked the front door and eased it open. When it was just wide enough to slip through, she ducked into Mrs. Baxter's house. She had been in there many times, so it didn't take her long to find the side door and unlock it from the inside. Got it, Jesse called. Running around the front of the house, the side door is open. One of the movers was peering into the roof. Hey, he said, there are babies in here. He grinned at Jesse. I bet the mama bird is glad that you're watching out for her babies. Jesse smiled as she and Dad thanked the movers for their help. Then she ran and disappeared into her own house. She couldn't wait to call Mrs. Baxter. Now we're going to look at the question that goes with this passage. and we're gonna try to decide how we can sequence this best. All right, so the question that we're gonna be looking at is we're gonna be placing these events in order by marking an X under the number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So we have 5 events here, and we're gonna put them in order of when they happened. So you need to make sure that you remember that if something is the first thing that happens, you only put one X in the first column because you can't have more than one thing happening first at a time. So let's look for the first thing that we're going to be looking for. The movers arrived to remove Mrs. Baxter's belongings. Then we're going to look for Jessie saw 4 speckled blue eggs in the nest. Mrs. Baxter moved from her house into an apartment. Jessie called Mrs. Baxter to tell her about the nest, and Jessie unlocked the side door to Mrs. Baxter's house. I remember all of those things happening in our story. So what I want to do to help me is I'm going to draw a few shapes to help me indicate in the passage where these things happened. So I'm going to put a circle next to this first question, a triangle next to the second question, a square next to the third one, a heart next to the fourth one, and let's say a diamond next to the fifth one. So now I'm going to go into my story and I'm going to find each of these pieces and put the same shape that matches. So the first thing we're going to look for is the movers arrived to remove Mrs. Baxter's belongings. So I'm going to go back in my story and look for the moment that the movers came to move Miss Baxter's belongings. So I remember that happened towards the end of the story. So I'm going to start about right here and look. So Dad shook his head. We'll tell the movers to be careful. Okay, so they haven't arrived yet. The next morning, Jessie watched the moving truck pull up in front of Mrs. Baxter's house. There it is. So I'm going to put a circle next to that clue. Okay, the next thing I'm going to look for is Jessie saw 4 speckled blue eggs in the nest. I know that happened at the beginning of the story, so I'm going to go look and find where Jessie saw 4 speckled blue eggs. Oh, look, there it is, 4 speckled blue eggs. And I'm going to put a triangle next to that clue. Next, I have Mrs. Baxter moved from her house into an apartment. Well, I only remember there being one time that they talked about an apartment in the story, and that was in the first sentence. So I'm going to make sure I'm going to use a square, and right here is the only time they reference her moving into her apartment. Okay, the fourth one, Jessie calls Mrs. Baxter to tell her about the nest. So this is the first time that Jessie calls Mrs. Baxter, and we're going to clue that one with a heart. So I know that was right down here. Jessie ran home to call Mrs. Baxter. Guess who moved into your old wreath? And I'm going to put a heart right there. Okay, and then the last one. Jessie unlocked the side door in Mrs. Baxter's house. Well, I know that happened at the end of the story because that was the solution to their problem. So we're going to look for where Jessie unlocks the side door. Now, it does say unlocked here, but that's talking about the front door. We're looking for the side door. So here's the side door, and she unlocked it from the inside. So let me make sure. I need a diamond right there. So now, all of your pieces, I'm going to erase our word that we used here earlier, just so we don't get confused. Now, all of your pieces are in order. All you have to do is match the sequence of the pictures to your answer. So the first one we're going to look for is the square. So next to the square, that one is going to be my number 1 because it's the first thing that happens. My triangle is the second thing that happens. So I'm going to go find my triangle, move over to the second square, and that's the second thing that happens. Okay, the third thing that happens is my heart. That's where she called her. So my heart right here, I'm going to scroll all the way over to column number 3 and put an X. And then I'm done with this side, let's go up here. We're gonna look for our circle. That's when the movers got to the house. So that is my 4th thing that happens. So I find my circle here, I move all the way over to the 4th column, and I put an X. And then the last thing is my diamond. And I'm gonna go find my diamond here. That is the 5th thing that happened, and we put an X in that column. All right, so today we've been talking about sequencing, and we learned about how Jesse helped save the baby birds in the story. And I want to just kind of wrap everything up by going over with you again what sequencing actually is. So sometimes you have sequencing in a chart, and it may show the life cycle of an animal. It may show a timeline that shows the dates of when things happen. These are all things that you need to be looking for when you're talking about sequencing. Dates, keywords, charts, and sometimes even directions can help you understand sequencing even better. So even when you're looking in timelines, you may have months, you may have years when things happen, but there's also some key words that you need to look for. When you're looking at a sequencing activity, you need to use these transition words to go from one activity to the next, from one part of your story to the next part. So these words include things like first, next, last, in the middle, after that, at the beginning, in the start. Those are words that you can look for to help you understand the sequencing of the story. So these are all super, super important words. You also need to remember these timelines. And you need to remember that every story that's a fiction story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it wouldn't make sense if you started at the end of the story. Your reader wouldn't understand what's happening. You must always start at the beginning, then go to the middle, and then go to the end. So I hope you've enjoyed our lesson today, and I hope that you were able to tell your friends about what sequencing is.